Uh, Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another virtual Parliamentary and Scientific Committee discussion meeting. You're all very welcome, and it's great to have you with us. Tonight we're discussing an issue that's very close to my heart, which is the science education and how that can support the UK in its aims to continue to be a science superpower. And so I'm very grateful to our speakers this evening who have joined us to take us through that subject. But before I come to them and to welcome them, can I welcome the number of new members that have joined us over the last 6 weeks. I think we've had 19 scientific societies, professional bodies and universities that have joined, and you are all very welcome indeed. And I hope you enjoy this evening as much as I've been enjoying our recent virtual meetings. I'm particularly grateful to STEM Learning UK, who is one of our new members. Thank you for joining us, and they have very kindly helped put the panel together for this evening's discussion. And can I particularly thank Amanda Dickens, who is the Head of Impact and Development at STEM Learning, for her valuable assistance in putting this all together. I think I mentioned this is our third meeting. They have been very successful, have been well attended, and I know that this one will be equally as enjoyable. A few ground rules, I suppose, before we kick off, which is that obviously if everyone could remain muted who isn't speaking. And if you have any questions that crop up during the presentations, which I'm sure you will have, please can you use the question and answer section. And what I will do is then pick those questions up after we've heard all three presentations. So I hope that's clear. And to help us go through this tonight, as I said, we have three speakers. We have Baroness Brown of Cambridge, who is Chair of STEM Learning and also Deputy Chair of the Committee on Climate Change and Chair of the Carbon Trust. So welcome, Julia. We have Ali Denholm, who is Head Teacher, Hemsworth Grange School in Gateshead. And finally, we have Donald Morrison, who is Senior Vice President and General Manager for People and Places Solutions, Europe, Middle East and Africa. That's quite a mouthful. All of you are very welcome. Each panelist has approximately 12 minutes. I will try and keep us to time, but we are a little bit flexible because we're here to actually hear what you have to say on this very important subject. So I think we shall start. And our first speaker is Baroness Brown, Julia. Julia, if I could pass over to you, and I know that you've got a presentation, so if you could flick that up on screen, we can get going.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Let me hope that this works. It seems to have done. I hope everybody can see that. So thank you very much. And those of you who were reading your Financial Times this morning may have noticed an article saying that the government is preparing a new industrial strategy. And this one is going to be very, very strongly science and technology based. So I don't know if Stephen's able to tell us a little bit more about that, perhaps if we're allowed to ask him questions as well, because I'd be very excited to hear about it. But the government's R&D roadmap, which was published earlier this year, sets out the ambition for the UK to be a science superpower. And whilst it recognises that this needs people, the R&D roadmap focuses on migration, so importing those people, and also on career paths. And of course, we all recognise that actually how we nurture our own young people so that they can contribute to and benefit from the UK as a science superpower is absolutely critical. So at STEM Learning, our vision is to help deliver a world-leading science education for every young person in the UK, and that's wherever they've come from, whatever their background, and actually whatever it is they want to do with their lives and their careers. So it's not just about educating the next generations of scientists and engineers. It's also about ensuring that those who don't want to be scientists and engineers but are able to be scientifically literate members of society. There is, of course, huge economic benefit if we draw on the potential of all young people, and if we educate more scientists and engineers, because we know they make a huge contribution as they work in science and engineering jobs. And I'm sure Donald will say more about that. They make a huge contribution to GDP. But also, we also know that science and engineering jobs are now some of the best paid and normally have some of the best job prospects and some of the best, some of the best prospects in terms of being employed for a good part of your working life. We also know from OECD research globally that actually science and technology courses are fantastic for disadvantaged students. That actually, if we want to get disadvantaged students to get into good professional, well-paying careers, then actually the more science they study at school, the better it is. And we know that internationally, but we also know that from our own research and indeed other research in the UK. And we also, of course, know that a scientifically literate population is hugely important. It helps people make good choices for themselves. It also helps us make good choices in the UK when we think about perhaps the ethical issues around medical procedures or new medical developments. But it also helps with fake news, for example. I mean, it's enormously beneficial if we have a scientifically literate public who don't get really worried by all of this stuff about vaccinations. I mean, the last thing we need at the moment is a whole lot of anti-vaxxer literature and fake news about that as we're trying to get through this COVID-19 challenge that we have all around us globally. So there are huge benefits to a really scientifically literate population. And in order to address all of those issues, it really is critical that we invest in great teaching, that we invest in our teachers and enable them to be really inspirational. So that's what I want to talk about, and that's very much what we do at STEM Learning. In a recent McKinsey report, they said no education system can exceed the quality of its teachers. They have multiple impact. Every teacher will teach thousands of young people through their career. And the foundations of children's interest in science are absolutely laid, we know, in primary school. But we also know that very few primary teachers are scientists. Indeed, very few of them will have studied science themselves beyond the age of 16. And yet here we are expecting them to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers at a critical time in their education. At secondary school, we find that science teachers are expected to teach across physics, chemistry, biology. I'm sure Ali can talk a bit about what that's really like as the head teacher of a school. These are actually very different subjects. It's like asking somebody to teach history, Latin, and English. We don't tend to do that of our arts teachers. And we know particularly that in disadvantaged areas, schools can find it very hard to recruit and retain specialist science teachers, especially physics teachers. And yet, we know that studying science is one of the best things we can do for social mobility. So it's in those very disadvantaged areas that actually we need the very best science teachers. And of course, we all remember the impact that great teachers had on our own subject choices. I was lucky enough at school to be taught by some really outstanding physics and chemistry teachers who were certainly absolutely the reason why I went into a career in science and engineering. And I was particularly lucky because my science and physics, my physics and chemistry teachers were women. So they were fantastic role models that told me that women could be hugely successful in these subjects. So teachers are just so important. So at STEM Learning, as I say, we work with teachers, and a big core of what we do is provide teacher continuing professional development. And we have gathered over the last 10 years or so a lot of evidence about what really makes the difference. So we can demonstrate that investing in our teachers through continuing professional development in science really does improve achievement and progression of our children. So in primary schools, where teachers have worked with us and through CPD, the pupil science knowledge improves at a 50% faster rate than in equivalent primary schools where their teachers have not had this investment and opportunity. At GCSE levels, schools double the rate of progress where they've engaged with our CPD. And that means a 10% increase in pupils getting 2 good science GCSEs. And if we look at last year's students, that would imply 1,600 more students achieving this benchmark. So 16,000, more students who could potentially be going on to further study and careers in this new science-based industrial strategy that the UK is going to be launching. And at A level, we know that schools who've engaged with our CPD see a really significant increase in entries for STEM subjects. And indeed, of the 8.5% increase nationally over the last 3 years, we can link 40% of that directly to schools that have engaged in STEM learning CPD. We also know from our surveys that continuing professional development of teachers helps them inspire their students. So it helps more girls and boys aspire to STEM careers, and it helps those students see themselves as the kinds of people who could have STEM careers. And it's hugely important that young people can put themselves into the positions of what a STEM career would feel like. And we also know that the investment the government makes in this continuing professional development through STEM learning is more than reciprocated by the benefits it gets. So there's the huge benefit that we're not trying to quantify of additional young people going into careers in science and engineering. But if we just simply look at the data we collect that shows how much more likely teachers are to stay in the profession if they feel invested in through CPD, and then we look at the fact that you don't therefore have to train all of those replacement teachers, then a return of 23 million of government funding on paying for CPD delivers back at least a 58 million saving on training. So I think there's huge evidence that investing in our teachers is an enormously important part of delivering all of those new science and technology professionals we're going to need to be a science superpower. So I say that's the core of what we do at STEM Learning. And if you don't mind if I tell you a little bit more about STEM Learning, the first thing to say that we're a not-for-profit company, which is mainly funded by government, but also by a number of great industrial partners who include Jacobs. All of our income is invested in STEM education, and indeed the small surplus that we make every year is reinvested into STEM education and primarily into supporting teachers. We have evidence that a lot of evidence that where teachers have CPD, are up to date with their subjects, are re-energized and enthused about their teaching, that makes a huge difference for students. And we reached 350,000 GCSE students last year, increasing their engagement, aspiration and attainment. We run Project Enthuse, which particularly supports schools in area of disadvantage because we know that STEM education supports social mobility. We run the STEM Ambassadors Network, of which Jacobs are a very important partner, and we have over 33,000 of ambassador volunteers who go into schools to support teachers and young people. We have over 14,000 free online STEM resources. We get into every school in the UK through 230,000 teachers who use our resources and engage with us in other ways. And we know that our 50,000 hours of CPD that we deliver every year helps to deliver better and more inspiring teachers. So I'd like to say a very big thank you to all of our partners, funders and supporters, because they are helping to make this happen. And we think this is going to be a hugely important part of delivering the UK as a science superpower. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to the further presentations and the discussion later. Thank you very much.
Julia, thank you very much indeed. Excellent canter through the fantastic work, and I've seen the work that STEM Learning does during my time as government envoy for engineering, so I'm aware of what you do. Just briefly, I wondered if you could explain precisely how ambassadors go into schools and what they do, what an example might look like for those who aren't aware of your work, and if there is anyone interested in getting involved with this in a wider sense who may be listening or sitting in on this, what should they do? Just to contact you? Perhaps you could just say about the scale.
Yeah, if they can go to the STEM Learning website, then we'll get them signed up as quickly as possible. Ambassadors do all sorts of things. We may have them helping with helping run STEM clubs in schools. We may have them going into schools to give careers talks, because of course so many school teachers have no idea about the kind of engineering and science careers that their students can go off and do. We may have them working with brownies and things to do science things for brownies. We may have them helping run holiday clubs to keep, particularly in disadvantaged areas, it's hugely important to keep children's knowledge up over particularly the long summer vacation period. Otherwise they get a sort of knowledge deficit compared sometimes to more their advantaged peers. So we're doing more and more work with running holiday initiatives of this sort. There'll be lots of things they can do now, because there'll be so much catching up that schools are needing because of the COVID-19 problems and the time that kids have had off school. So there'll be lots of mentoring and other initiatives. And we've got lots of online STEM ambassador activities going on at the moment. So please look at the website, find out how to sign up. And I'm sure Donald will tell you about the fantastic things that Jacob's STEM ambassadors do, because they've got a brilliant group of STEM ambassadors.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Right, and you kept perfectly to time. That is most impressive. So I'm now going to move to our second speaker, who is Ali Denon, who is the head teacher of Heworth Grange School in Gateshead. Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. It's Heworth Grange, actually. We get there in the end.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, don't worry. Hi, everybody. Good evening. And it's really lovely to be here today. I just want to start off by saying that, I'm head teacher of a school in Gateshead. It is an area of really high deprivation. 50% of the students are in receipt of pupil premium, and there are a significant proportion that are just above that are, from families that are just managing. And it's a similar pattern all the way around the UK, particularly in areas of high deprivation, where you end up with schools that find themselves in really challenging circumstances. And that is no different to the one that I'm working in now. You often get a situation where leadership has been inconsistent over a period of time, and that means that standards have really dropped. And obviously, from my point of view, I started out as a science teacher. To see standards dropping in the STEM subjects, and particularly science, is really concerning and worrying for me. So I think from my point of view, education, just reiterating what Julia's just said, is just such a driver for social mobility. And the importance of science is even greater because it's such a facilitating subject. So to ensure that all our students have access to great science education, maths education, is just pivotal to school improvement. And I think when I think about our students that I work with on a daily basis, to have access to that great science education means that they have much greater life chances, that they can go on to study more subjects further on, You know, not all of them are going to become medics or researchers or computer scientists, but it is about developing that public understanding of science so that our young people become these great citizens that can make really informed choices about some really complicated issues, you know, relating to their health, relating to the environment, all the issues that are becoming more and more important as time goes on. And I think in order to ensure that those students, particularly those from really deprived communities, have access to great education, we need great leaders, brilliant if they've got a STEM background, and we need really great science teachers. And that requires really highly effective CPD, and it requires CPD to be available in a range of different formats, whether that is online, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's residential, and we need to be able to flex and offer that to the education system as a whole. I think from my point of view, I've always worked in education, and I started out as a science teacher, and I wanted to be able to have more impact on the students that I worked with, and I felt that the leadership journey was the way that I could do that. And so I became a head of science, and it coincided with the opening of the National Science Learning Centre, which is now, obviously we have STEM learning limited now, and I was able to recruit onto the new and aspiring heads of science course, which had literally just opened and is a flagship course and is still a really important part of the offer at York. And just through that opportunity, it was a course that lasted 18 months. I was really able to find out about leadership of quite a big science team that I took over, but also about how to develop the curriculum in science and how to ensure that we are presenting quite abstract ideas to students in a really effective way, and that it's supported by great practical ideas for experiments and investigations. And I think through that training, it just inspired me even more to go out and really work with the team and make sure that we were providing a really substantial offer. And the actual training was so useful because you built up this peer network that had impact initiatives, so that you worked on something, you went back into the school, you worked on the impact initiative, and then went back and talked about how successful certain elements of that had been, which really makes it value for money from my point of view, now looking back as a head teacher. And I think from there, we were able to really grow that department. It became extremely successful. We had a full suite of offers of GCSE courses, including double and triple award, applied science for particular students, environmental science, astronomy, and a full suite at A-level. And from that, it meant that we were able to ensure that at least all the sixth form that stayed on studied at least one science into their A-levels. You know, 80% of them went on to study that further as well. So it was really successful. I went from there and started to move back into more challenging circumstances and went to be an assistant head at a school on the South Coast in Hastings. And the remit there really was to turn around science and computing, because that was the area of school that the piece of the jigsaw that was missing, that wasn't performing. And I was able to take the training that I'd had through STEM learning and really use that and cascade that through into that particular area of that school. And within the space of 1 year, we were able to improve the outcomes there by 50%, which meant that our school moved from a requires improvement judgment at Ofsted to a good judgment, which is obviously great for that school and great for the community that the school is in. I moved from there to vice principal position, and then actually decided to take up headship, relocating up to the northeast, which was exciting and obviously different in many respects. It is really hard as a head to recruit in science areas, and actually across STEM it can be really, really challenging, and we often have to work with members of staff who have lots of energy but are non-specialists. And therefore, that CPD that's really important is about developing scientific knowledge and understanding for our teachers, so that they can really effectively deliver concepts that are quite challenging and difficult. We know that the sciences are some of the most challenging subjects that our students will learn. So having that opportunity to access CPD for the teachers is vital. And what I saw at the school in South Shields, where I worked at first as a head, was that we went from a position of science being, you know, really underperforming, that students were leaving school without the science qualifications that they needed to take their next steps in life. And we had to work really, really hard. I was able to secure a head of science who was equally passionate about the subject as I am. And with really strategic and targeted work and CPD on the curriculum and the delivery in the classrooms, working specifically around scientific literacy, trying to unpick words like momentum and calibration and making sure that everybody can access that, and spotting misconceptions when they arise, we're able to take that set of outcomes and improve them by 45% in 1 year, which is huge. That school is 70% pupil premium, 25% of those students had special educational needs. And the school just went from strength to strength. And a big part of the delivery there was also about inspiring the students to think about STEM careers. And we did a lot of work with STEM ambassadors. We were able to run particular projects. We did a big project with Siemens on a green powered car, which was so exciting. And then we did workshops for girls in science, as well as STEM ambassadors mentoring our students as well. And that was specifically aimed at students from more disadvantaged backgrounds. I'm now in Gateshead, and it is a similar pattern. We've got a situation where the science team hasn't had leadership over a period of time, and we're now at a point where we're starting to put that CPD in place, and we're starting to really develop that team and giving, you know, we've got several non-specialists in that team, and we're having to support their scientific knowledge and understanding. And to be able to do that and access CPD through STEM learning has been absolutely brilliant. So all of the staff in that team have been able to access the online modules during lockdown, and they're really excited to carry on with their CPD as we go forward. And I think really the final part for me is that, you know, headship is challenging. It is really challenging when you're doing it in difficult circumstances. And CPD is really essential to that transformation process. And without it, we can't skill teachers up. And I think the fact that through STEM learning, we're able to access a lot of that training with the help of bursaries from a headship point of view makes that a reality. Because if we had to pay full amounts for all of that training, it would be really, really difficult to put that into place. And I think at this moment in time, when we think about the impact of COVID on our children, it's even more pertinent that we invest in CPD. You know, we've got children who are coming to school who have been out of school, particularly the older students who are just about to take exams. They've been out of school since March, and they have all sorts of anxiety around coming back in. And once we get them back in, we've then got to ascertain really quickly where they are and what can we do in terms of rearranging the curriculum to make sure that we plug the gaps that are there, because they're still going to have to take some kind of formal examination next year. So CPD is vital in terms of skilling our teachers to use their diagnostic tools to find out where the students are very, very quickly. It's really important that they feel confident about asking open questions, that they're able to support our children, reframe concepts and model some really abstract concepts to our students so that they can understand them, and not taking anything for granted, because children who maybe come from a more disadvantaged background don't necessarily have the experiences that maybe other children from more advantaged backgrounds take for granted. And they haven't had that chance to build up that bank of scientific capital that other children come to school with, just from the conversations that they have around the dinner table. So the other part for me is also the importance of online teaching now. I know at any point we could go into a lockdown for a particular year group, or even for a whole school if we get a number of cases. And so this has always been a thing for teachers, that we would, you know, put put in place online learning particularly for developing mastery in readiness for exams, but this now becomes something all the way through from the youngest children to the oldest children, that they are able to access really substantial online learning that will take the place of seeing their teachers face to face. And this is quite a new area for a lot of staff, and it needs careful planning and support. And again, I think that is a really important area of CPD that I know I'm just currently working with my teachers about. And I think, just to reiterate the fact that CPD is truly transformational, and ensuring that our government does continue to invest in that, and particularly now, I've just spent £1,000 on hand sanitizer in the last month to ensure that the school can carry out all the COVID procedures that it has to. That's a significant proportion out of our budget. And I don't want to miss out on teachers getting the great CPD that they need because of that. So having access to subsidised CPD is absolutely essential. And if we're going to really support science education to really become this great superpower, then we need great teachers to do that, and we need CPD to support them. And that's a vital part of school improvement across the UK. Thank you.
Ali, thank you very much indeed. It's very obvious that you are absolutely passionate about science education for the children that are within your school, and also for ensuring that your staff have the CPD that they need. I think it's pretty well established that the role of role models in all of this is also vitally important, and that seeing people like yourself doing these roles is vital, which perhaps from a more deprived background isn't as common. Do you work with parents at all to try and get them to see the whole range of opportunities that a good science education that they may not have had at school can deliver for their children, and why it's worth investing in this and building that science capital?
So I think, in my previous schools that has been easier than in the later schools that I've worked in. And I think, in the schools that I've worked in that are more advantaged, the parents and the carers are extremely engaged, and I was able to run workshops with parents so that they could work through practical science and so on, and really understand the concept, so that when they were at home and children asked, they could explain what the difference is between dissolving and melting and things like that are common misconceptions. As you move into more challenging areas, it is more difficult because parents sometimes have not had a great experience themselves at school. They can feel quite insecure about coming to school. It can feel quite confrontational. So at my previous school, it took a long time to build that relationship of trust with our parents. And over time, we were able to do that. And then parents would come in, and if we ran a session on science GCSE, for example, we were getting 80% of parents turning up for that, and we were able to really support them, to help them support children at home, so they were really well informed. But it takes time, and it takes time to build up that element of trust. I think activities like we talked about with the STEM ambassadors are great, and I particularly have used those in working with primary age groups and parents from primary children. And it's a really great way. A family learning day is a great way of engaging families together to learn together in a kind of non-confrontational way, but it needs planning, and obviously it requires people to engage with us from industry and so on, and from the STEM Ambassador Network. But they're really exciting days when they come together. It's really, really good. But I just emphasize the fact that it takes time to build that trust, and we need non-confrontational activities to entice people in to school.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for your presentation. And we'll now move on to our third speaker, which is Donald Morris, who I failed to mention is from Jacobs. I apologise for that, Donald Morrison. And as I said, we're now going to hear a little bit from your perspective. So, Donald, over to you, 12 minutes.
Great, thanks, Stephen. I'm just wanting to make sure you can hear me first. Could you just give me a thumbs up? I'm not sure if I came off mute.
Yeah, no, we can hear you.
Trying to do too many things here at once. Great. So thanks for the welcome. I just want to run through hopefully a few slides that perhaps draw together some of the themes that Julia and Ali were speaking about. And I always like to start with a why. So I'm going to start with a why, then a how, then a why, and then give you a couple of practical examples of some of the things that we are involved with at Jacobs. So STEM is absolutely at the epicenter of developing the future and addressing complex issues such as urban migration, climate threats, cybersecurity, and natural resource stresses that we get involved with at Jacobs. It's a clear priority for us, and we work to solve some of the toughest challenges faced by our clients and communities. Now, that we do that across the UK and across the globe, I think a key part of this discussion should also be the fact that we do it across the globe from the UK. So we are really a great exporter of talent. So we're involved in buildings and infrastructure programs across the globe, and also critical mission solutions programs, as we like to call them. So we have 3,500 people of our 55,000 people globally working with NASA. So we do truly go from, people designing highways to rocket scientists, and we've got people working on missions to Mars at the moment. But at our UK level, we're involved with programs such as the refurbishment of the Palace of Westminster, High Speed 2, some of the other significant infrastructure programs across the UK, and also very much the local agenda down to local flood resilience type of programs. So it's really critical from our perspective that we promote STEM and be a key contributor to the broader skills solution to keep pace globally. And I genuinely still believe we are setting the standard globally as part of a global organisation. I see this day in, day out, that we are really leading this space still in the UK. But last but not least, it's critical for us as an organisation to provide pathway opportunities for disadvantaged communities and to make a social value impact where it matters most in those communities. So how do we invest in that agenda? As a business, we're working to influence positive change through our STEM engagement. We can be the influence for educational and career decisions for future generations, and attract a diverse and broad spectrum of talent with the future skills that we need. And one of the biggest challenges that we see in the business at the moment is the ability of our staff to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that foundation that we really set through some of the STEM activities sets our staff and the students that we're engaging with up well for future careers in STEM. And I would say it's never too early to start on this agenda. I think the earliest example of STEM engagement we've got at the moment is with 3- and 4-year-olds on the back of a roads programme in Scotland, the A9 upgrading, where we've established the Academy 9 programme. And some of our aquatic ecologists were out doing some surveys and bumped into a group of nursery children, got speaking, and we've now set up a programme with kids of 3 or 4 years old. We're also working closely with STEM Learning UK, as Julia has indicated, and we're bringing schools together to form enthused partnerships. And these make lasting impressions to the quality of science and education. I think one of the biggest challenges we face, though, is that just of focus and about having an impact where it's most needed. So we've been very deliberate in piloting 3 partnerships at the moment, supporting schools in Bristol, Manchester, and Glasgow to drive to create sustainable improvements. But that doesn't stop us having a broader impact. And indeed, my last working day before lockdown in the days when we used to physically work and collaborate was actually spent at a primary school, Colin Manor Primary School, just near Heathrow, and then in Hounslow Borough Council buildings. Just experiencing the skills builder universal framework that's been set up. And I would probably say it was the most humbling day of my career, seeing that journey from primary school kids to disadvantaged school kids getting their first employment with Hounslow Borough Council, to then some of them being assimilated into the Heathrow workforce. and some great leadership being shown by John Holland-Kay and his team at Heathrow there on this agenda. So we work with our people to raise their individual awareness of their own skills through the lens of the Skills Builder framework, and by encouraging employees at all levels in the organisation to become STEM ambassadors. And that's something I'll come back to just on, I think, on my ultimate slide here. So coming back to another why, so why should government invest alongside business? I think there's been a great recognition over recent years within government of the importance of STEM skills, but we can't let it up there. I think it's been good to see recently the focus brought to T-levels, to apprenticeships and to extra university places for STEM subjects. And we really welcome the ambition of the current government to make the UK a scientific superpower and support the development of technologies to reach net carbon zero by 2050. And again, I totally believe that we can do that. We can lead the world there from the UK. And again, as I said at the outset, a STEM education has economic, social, cultural, and ethical value with positive impacts and on social mobility. And we absolutely see this in the workforce that we are employing now. And I think critically, STEM also plays a key part in the government's levelling up agenda by promoting diversity and equality through future careers there as well. So a couple of practical examples now just on these final 3 slides. I think it's perhaps been too early to celebrate some of the silver linings coming out of the COVID pandemic, but one of them from a Jacobs perspective has been our work placement programme over the last number of months and really making that virtual. For a number of years, we've recognised the positive impact that industrial and commercial placements can have to gaining a better understanding for students for career pathways. So in response to the pandemic, a number of our STEM ambassadors rapidly developed, tested and delivered a suite of online STEM initiatives. And you can see some of the statistics there. They're quite incredible up in the top right-hand side of this slide. Over 15,000 work placement hours just over the last six months. And these have been deeply impactful for the students that have been involved with them. And we actually led these with something really topical for the period that we're in. We took students through the design of a vaccine production facility. And it gave the students great opportunities to develop STEM skills ranging from project management to some of the technical skills around architecture and engineering, and other critical skills like problem solving and understanding multiple data sources, which is a kind of key issue for us in this modern world about how we leverage data. So that was a really exciting development over the last 6 months that we will absolutely be continuing. One of the other foundations of Jacobs is really our focus on inclusion. And just last month, we launched our Global Action Plan for Justice and Equality. And to develop the STEM skills that the UK needs, it's critical that we continually promote gender diversity and equality in STEM learning. And over the last 6 months, some of the actions that we've taken as a business just to get ourselves to provide a level of sustainability and resilience have been, things like salary freezes. But one of the things that we have just earlier this afternoon, just approved over 100 promotions for our people who've become chartered professionals over the last 6 months. And delighted to say that from a workforce that is approximately 30% female, 70% male at the moment, 60% of those approvals that I gave this afternoon were for females. So really starting to see the impact that we're having in that space too. Another example, we're very keen as an organisation, and I think Ali was alluding to this, about the importance of a company like ours being part of the fabric of local communities. And the example you see there with Katie and Rebecca was the big partnership that we developed with Carmel College in Darlington to provide students with some of the insights that they need to take on engineering and science type opportunities. And this was really elevating the possibilities for these types of individuals. And then just finally, again, another first this year. Over this last summer, we've had over 300 interns in our organisation across the globe. We didn't cancel that programme. We were able to pivot very quickly to make that a fully online programme. And that actually enabled us to make the programme even more inclusive than normal by much more executive engagement from the company, and really covered a wide number of skills there for those interns. And we're really looking at how we chart the careers of individuals, probably from the kind of high school age now through to placements, interns, sponsorship through college, apprenticeships or degree apprenticeships into the organisation. So within Jacobs, within my region, across Europe, Middle East and Africa, we've got over 800 graduates, technicians and apprentices currently training on our 2-year graduate programme, our apprenticeship programmes, etc. And we give them some really good structure, engage them in these STEM partnerships, get them to be STEM ambassadors, and really exciting place to be, and again, elevating their possibilities when they come into the workplace. So hopefully in these few comments and few slides, it's given some of the examples of where we're at as an organisation on this agenda. And our key purpose is delivering solutions for a more connected, sustainable world. And we need that diversity of talent coming into the business from as early as age as possible. So we're highly committed to this agenda, and working with Julia and organisations like hers and the education sector to furthering the cause. Thanks, Stephen.
Donald, thank you very much indeed for your presentation, and obviously all the work that Jacobs are doing. I was particularly interested in the pathways to opportunities bit, and picking up a bit on what Ali was saying, that it's sometimes the hard to reach groups. Can you give us any practical examples of where and how you've done it? And does it happen on a regional basis? Does it happen around where you have sites? Or are you trying to scale this up to the most deprived areas in the UK? Yeah,
we've been very deliberate, Stephen. I think we've talked there about the 3 focus cities we've got in the UK, but even within those cities, we've tended to go for a middle class school, an all girls school, and a school from a more deprived area. So being absolutely deliberate. The biggest challenge we've got, we employ 11,000 people in the UK. We're all very passionate about our locality, but we can't be all things to all people in every locality. So the challenge for us has really been to be very focused. And if we focus, we'll get the return. That does mean we need to exclude, but I think we can have a bigger impact that way. So it's been deliberate in an area, and then getting those different groups in that area to collaborate, because it's that diversity of thought that we believe really brings the differential to the solutions we then develop.
Excellent. And just as a quick follow-up, do you work with other companies, organisations of similar size to yourself to share what is best practice, so that you're, 1, not doubling up, but 2, making sure you're spreading the right message as far and wide as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's probably another one of the silver linings of the COVID pandemic. Just at 3 o'clock this afternoon, myself and 5 other companies we had a session with Nadeem Zahawi, just talking about collaboration and how we can focus more. So definitely.
Fabulous. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all 3 of our presenters. Right, we're going to go over to sort of a bit of interaction now. I've got a couple of questions in my inbox, but just before I go to those questions, I think Jeff Richards wanted just to make a statement rather than a question. Jeff, can you hear us? And Ben, I assume, will unmute you. Oh.
Hi, yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Jeff.
I'm sorry. I had to unmute myself on the speaker and on the screen. So I actually live in Switzerland, but I'm a fellow of the Learned Society of Wales. And I had a great childhood in school, and of course the teachers are what start you in STEM and move you forward. So in a small village in Wales, in Llanfachlin, so 2,000 people, this moved me forward. But I left in '91 and came to Switzerland, and I'm highly involved here in the innovation side, and also with connected with some British people who come over to the WEF each year. So there's one person you may want to get in touch with. I don't know if Baroness Brown knows him. His name is Nick Chambers, who's involved a lot with education of young people. One second. He's CEO of Education and Employers at Quantum House, Fleet Street, London. And this is a great group. I can forward an email to you afterwards of what they're trying to do with youngsters. And I was involved with helping encourage females at the school here for ages maybe 9 to 12-year-olds to get interested in STEM. And the main problem for getting girls interested in STEM is they need to see role models, and seeing a bald, fat role model like me is not really the role model they need to see. They need to see women as role models. And this is really something that we realize is important. And it's something we're trying to do at the AO Foundation as well. To give you an idea, I run research for the AO Foundation, which started internal fracture fixation of bones. And we have 150 trustees. One is female. Orthopedic surgeons, this is terrible. And we have an access initiative that we're trying to change that now. And it's not because there are no female surgeons, there are not many female role models. That's the problem. There are many female surgeons, and in the veterinary field, they're probably 80% female now. So I'm really happy to see this moving forward. And it seems strange that I click on from Switzerland because I'm a double passport. Of course, it's very nice to see if I can be of any help in Britain. Sorry I took so long.
No problem at all, Jeff. Thank you for those insights. I don't know if anyone wanted to pick up on anything. If not, if you indicate in the usual way, if not, I'll go on to, Julia.
I was just going to say we'd be delighted to have the contact, Jeff, with Nick Chambers. But just to say, the STEM Ambassadors program is fantastic for role models, because many of the STEM ambassadors from our science and engineering companies are in fact women. A much higher proportion of women in the STEM ambassador population than they actually have in their employee population. They're quite often quite young, not so far out of university or their apprenticeships themselves. And so they really connect with the school kids. And indeed, at Jacobs, I think they have more than 50% of your STEM ambassadors are female, which is brilliant given the subject areas they're in.
Yeah, and I think it's an area you have to be very deliberate in. Within my region last year, we recruited 41% females from 29% female applications. So it's absolutely an area of focus for us. So no, key point.
And those are just wonderful role models going into schools.
Fantastic. Thank you. Right. Our first question is from long-standing member of the committee, Atty. Can we find Atty, Ben? And Atty, if you could just introduce yourself and say who you're representing, and then fire away with your question.
Hi all. I take it you can hear me, yeah?
We can hear you, Atty.
Excellent. Hi. So I am now work for Elsevier, but I also retain an interest at the University of Surrey. But one of the reasons I joined today is because when I ran the ERA Foundation, we engaged with Project Enthuse, and that was a real pleasure to do that. And I'm delighted to see that it's still going and others have joined as well. My question really, just wanted to explore what was been happening in relation to T-levels. I know they're new. I know that they haven't had a chance to bed in, but I'm sure people are giving some thought to how the T-levels may be changing the dynamics for encouraging young people into certain elements of STEM. I think there's a specific focus, for example, on construction and digital at the moment, but I'm no expert in this, and I may be wrong in that. But also I'm interested to know, what does it mean for the CPD that has formed quite a focus of today's discussion? Does it mean that the CPD programs that have been developed will need significant shifts, or is it just an evolution? And I'd just be interested to know how we see T-levels changing the dynamics in both those areas. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Who would like to try and address? Anyone have a?
Well, I'm happy to pick up. I mean, we've been looking at T levels at STEM learning and wondering what support we can provide. And I'm sure one of the issues will be that there will be teachers with some very different backgrounds, more teachers who've actually spent time in industry themselves, who've come into the FE sector for doing some of this teaching, who will have some different needs in terms of their CPD. So this is something that we're working on. We haven't launched any T-level specific courses, but it's something we very much have in mind and are looking to see what the need will be. But Ali may well have much more experience of T-levels from a teacher.
Ali, did you want to add anything?
To be honest, I think I've talked to people at STEM about this, and I think at the moment the uptake of T levels around in colleges and so on is it's not gathering pace at the moment. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of answer that question. And I suppose until there's that need, a bit like Julia's just said, it's hard to know what the CPD will be. But I agree with you in terms of focus in those key areas. That is definitely true. So we've got, particularly in areas like, for example, the Northeast, there's a big drive there in terms of digital technologies and so on. And so what I'm trying to do as a head teacher is to make sure that the children that go through my school actually have the skills that they need to be able to take up those job opportunities when they leave. And certainly the colleges are expanding their provision. But in terms of the T levels at the moment, the students are still looking at doing different qualifications right now. So I think more work to be done in that area. That's as much as I can kind of comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question is from an individual member of the committee, Eric Orborn. Eric, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear
If you
me?
could just reintroduce yourself and
Eric
say
Alburn.
who you're representing.
I'm by background a research scientist, and for half my life I've sort of been a teacher in a school. And my first question initially to Julia was talking a lot about CPDs, and I wonder really what are the key things which make them work. Which is it just information, and or is there more to it than that? But listening further, I was very interested in how we address the whole business of disadvantaged students. And we do some work. I run a charity called Clifton Scientific Trust, which is doing this sort of stuff. How you engage disadvantaged students, and how you give students the idea that science isn't just a dead thing, but it involves in real life team working. It's very, very difficult in I think in the usual kind of curriculum to give students the idea that there are teams where people are working together to solve problems, and they all have different ways of doing things, different skills and so on. So how do you bring that experience of real life science into schools, which I know the ambassadors do something about, but I think it's something that needs to be stressed. And also when Donald was speaking, talking about international things, could I ask, because we do stuff with Japan, could I ask how his organization and the people he deals with, do you do things building bridges internationally so you can get some sort of sort of global awareness through science?
Thank you, Eric.
I'm sorry it's unstructured.
That's okay. No, I don't know who would like to pick up on bits of that. Donald, do you want to?
Yeah, do you want me to start? Yeah, I totally agree, Eric, on those kind of broader, more collaborative skills. And I did mention in passing there the work that we do with the Skills Builder Universal Framework. And I think that really goes back to the earliest stages in the education of children. And I think that was one of the things that really ignited my passion back at the end of March, the day I saw that in live action down in the Colin Manor Primary School. In terms of, and that is igniting that passion, or really practical examples.
Could I just say that we find that students working together builds huge momentum and huge enthusiasm, much more than learning stuff, but actually putting learning to work is really important and very motivating.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the big challenges, if you go back to the point that Ali was making around the need for resilience, if we go into another COVID lockdown and virtual learning, one of the things that I think it was very easy for business to move to 100% virtual, but in this kind of transition, hopefully back to some sort of new normal, if we're allowed to use that phrase, when people are virtual and physical, you really miss that collaboration, and you need to be much, much more deliberate in how we include. To the point on global collaboration, absolutely. I cover quite a huge geography of Europe, Middle East, and Africa of our business. That covers around 15,000 people. And then we are very connected with 3 geographies globally in terms of how we deliver our business and the footprint of our clients. Generally in our infrastructure business, we deliver to regional clients in the 3 geographies that we operate out of, but we do a lot of work in the life sciences and the electronics business and follow clients around the globe because they want things done one way. So we do a lot of our global meetings, which happen 4 times a year, will be really focused on sharing that type of learning. But I honestly believe that we don't realise how far ahead we are in the UK on this agenda. Now, that's not a complacency comment, but I think there's a lot that we could export in terms of this talent and thinking globally.
Thank you.
Excellent. Did anyone else want to pick up on the other point, any of the other points that Eric made?
I'm sure Ali's the right person to talk about children working in teams.
Ali.
I'd really love to. Thank you for that question. I love that question. I think from my point of view, present circumstances aside, because COVID is making any kind of collaboration really, really difficult, and everybody's just sat in rows in every school in the land at the moment. So that is a problem right now. But from my point of view, there are several elements to this. One is about the curriculum. And so before the curriculum had its most recent reincarnation for science curriculum, there was a big drive in the previous curriculum about understanding scientific communities. And that was actually part of, a substantial part of the examination was about understanding how scientific communities work together to support research and so on. And so children were expressly taught about that because it was part of an exam. And that has kind of disappeared a little bit. So what I would say is we really need to think about what we put into the curriculum requirements to make sure that, particularly at the examination level, that is expressly taught. I do think that many science teachers keep that element within because, there are some great examples, for example, things like the Human Genome Project and so on that are really important and a really good example of how scientific communities work together. Currently, obviously, we're looking at the opportunity of talking about how a vaccine might be produced right now. And again, that helps the children to understand that. I think in terms of working within a normal situation in schools, there are lots of different ways of working through that, but the importance of practical science is massive. And unfortunately, because of the pressure on curriculum, practical science is the bit that always gets squeezed. We've gone from children having to do a practical investigation to now just answering questions on a paper. So in actual fact, staff could get away with actually not ever doing a practical and just teaching them how to answer a question. And that's a massive risk for me in terms of the development of the skills that they needed in order to support the next generation of technicians, of scientists, of engineers, and so on. And that's a substantial concern that I have, and I can't emphasize that enough. Younger students like to work in little groups where they are working through an investigation. One's a recorder, one is a manager, and so on, and they'll have roles within that group, and they try to make sure that they stick within that and they swap around so that they can learn about what it's like to do the different roles within that investigation. So outside of the normal school lessons, enrichment and extracurricular is also a really good opportunity to understand how scientists work. And I think no one can underestimate the importance of science clubs. STEM learning are really helpful in terms of supporting that area as well, and will help schools to set up and run science clubs and provide material for technicians and science teachers to be able to deliver that. So, you know, that is outside of normal lessons, and it is about generating that spirit of curiosity and collaboration, so that they can work through problems and solve them. And it may be different things than what they would do in normal lessons. The other part for me is about working really closely with universities, and particularly at secondary school age level. You know, there are many universities where I am, Northumbria and Newcastle and so on, who will work really, really closely with schools, and their undergraduates will come into school, and postgraduates too, to run particular projects with children. It's almost like having a scientist in residence in the school, and that project can run for several weeks or months, or just be a one-off day. And again, it just brings that reality to life, and they can talk about how they work together as a team back at the university. So it's just a really cool way.
Can I just say, I think what you're saying towards the end of what you're saying is really important. It's not just learning about how these teams work, it's actually being them and doing them. And I think as much as, I know COVID doesn't allow these things very much, but as much as you can do it, and I'm sure the Science Ambassadors help within the Science Partnership Scheme that Royal Society does, and I don't want to blow our own trumpet, but we've been doing UK Japan Young Scientist workshops with scientists and young people from Japan and Britain for 20 years. And the experience of that is profound. I mean,
Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because we've got a lot of questions and a limited time,
yeah.
I mean, you've made an excellent point around the collaboration issues, and perhaps you can pick up on or maybe send some of the information that you've got to our panelists around the work you've been doing to collaborate with people in Japan.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Right, just before I go to John Lowe, because I've got two questions that really follow on from what Eric was saying, or what Ali said in one of her answers. So firstly, I want to go to Julian Braybrook, who was worried about the teaching of practical science and making it fun. And then I'm going to come to John Lowe, who is a long-standing member of the committee with a great interest in science education. So Julian first, if you're there.
Stephen, I think Julian has left us.
Ah, okay. Well, in that case, I will go to John Lowe. John.
Oh well.
Friends, there's it. I just found the microphone. Thank you.
Marvellous. Hello, John.
Okay. The general point that I want to make is that we need technicians as much as we need high-level engineers. And I'm concerned that the new industrial strategy, I recognize it's only a teaser that we've heard about from you, Julia, about what's coming, but if it doesn't support the technician side as well as the high level, then we won't have the industry, the sort of people that we need in Jacobs, for example, to have a strong enough economy. So my question is, we've been talking about scientists. I know we mean engineers and technicians and mathematicians as well, but what do we know about the emerging industrial strategy and its ability to support further education? I'm thinking of bodies like your own, Stephen, with ProCat down at Basildon, encouraging those sort of skills as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I think you make a good point. We don't know any detail of the industrial strategy.
I think that's a question for you, Stephen. Can you?
I know, and I was just saying, I have no further information on the industrial strategy at the moment, but the point John makes about the importance of technicians and people at all levels across the science community, I think is a very well made one, and one which John has made on numerous occasions. You know, we talk about having the very best and the brightest, yes, but they need the support of a range of very highly skilled technical people to make possible what they do. And I think what lies behind the new industrial strategy is it's obviously there are sectors of our economy that have been more affected than others by COVID. And I think we need to make sure that we are focusing our energies in the right place. But we'll have to wait and see what comes out of that.
I know I'm pushing on an open door, Stephen, but couldn't resist the opportunity because I know that you're very keen on this as I am as well. And you know we do practical things as well. So no apologies. Thank you very much for taking the point.
Thanks, John. Right. Let us, unless any of the panelists want to comment on what John said, we'll move on. I don't see anyone indicating. In that case, I'm going to now ask Steve Barton to put his question, which I think is around science education in primary schools, and then I want a quick follow-up on that one. So, Steve, are you with us? Has Steve left us? It would appear, so I can't see name in the list of attendees.
Well, yes, he should be here.
Have you just unmuted him?
He's not muted either.
Oh, okay, Steve, are you there? If not, I'll come back to that. So, well, I can actually read you his question, which was, given the low level science in primary education and the potential impact of increasing confidence and use of everyday science to enthuse staff and children, are there any initiatives you can let us know about and how scientific societies can contribute? I think this is just improving the overall level of science teaching in primary schools, maybe using other parts of the curriculum to embed some science with, and how learned societies might do that. And my concern at the moment is, so as an elected member, I've been visiting a number of schools as they have reopened, and obviously with my interest in science, I ask, particularly in primary schools, how do they deliver a science curriculum? And what I'm concerned about is there is such a focus at the moment on the 6-month gap for primary schools that they are pushing all their energies, and this is not a criticism in any way, into catching up with maths and English, that I am concerned that the science curriculum part of that will be pushed out, and there'll be a chunk of children who potentially don't get that first building block of a science education, and it's whether we can think of ways to recommend bridging that gap. Julia.
Well, I was going to say we have we engage with the science leads. Every primary school has a science lead. They may not be a scientist. In fact, generally they're not. And we have special CPD courses for primary science, which are very popular. But unfortunately, that's not an area of focus for the government at the moment. And the government funding we have is not being prioritised towards support for primary science teachers. It's being prioritised towards secondary. So we see both as hugely important. We also have an enormous amount of material which is identified on our website, identified as suitable for primary and secondary. We're always very keen to work with professional institutions, professional societies, who often have quite a lot of material of this sort that we can link to, and we can tag for teachers to tell them what level it's suitable for, and where it might be used. And we've also got sample lessons and things, a whole range of things we produced during lockdown, which support all levels of teaching. But I would share your concern, Stephen, about that move away from that focus back towards English and maths, and concern about the loss, because we know the primary experience in science is so important for the decisions that children make later on.
Absolutely. So I think we share those concerns. I don't know if anyone else wanted to comment.
Maybe just one point, Stephen. I think, as I said earlier, I think it's never too early to engage. And I wasn't aware of that issue, Julia, around the targeting of funding. But if I look across the diversity of projects and programs we're delivering across, nearly every part of the UK at the moment, and along with peer organisations, you know, for modest amounts of funding, you know, if you go back to the practical example that Ali gave of the impact of not having £1,000, if there was some sort of alignment with, you know, project educational leads, you know, into schools, like the Academy 9 programme that we've won awards for, I think that could be deeply impactful, because that understanding of science that could be driven from a really practical level in delivery, I think could just be fascinating for kids and really ignite their, you know, passions at the earliest stages, like we did with 3 or 4 year old kids seeing aquatic ecologists in a river.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to invite David Smith, and David, I'm not sure where you're from, so if you could introduce yourself when we unmute you.
Hopefully you can hear me.
I can.
Good, good. I'm by background, I'm an academic chemist working at the University of Bristol as, well, grandly titled Faculty Education Director, but therefore responsible for STEM education. And I'm quite interested, several speakers have mentioned the benefit of a more general benefit to society of a scientifically literate population. And we often make the case for investment on the basis of students or school leavers going into careers where they use their STEM knowledge directly. But I'm quite interested in whether we can make a case for the economic value of that general scientific literacy. And I'm not really aware of any evidence that we might use.
So would anyone like to pick up on that?
That's a very good question, and certainly one I'm very happy to take away and ask the team at STEM Learning what they know of the literature in that area, because I think it's a very good and a very interesting question. I mean, it seems, I'm sure to all of us, so patently obvious, and I'm sure you could do a back of the envelope calculation about you know, the cost of parents not having their children vaccinated with the MMR vaccine to the NHS, for example, and it would come up with a very big number.
And that's exactly what I think, that it does seem obvious. And I'm also interested by the number of students, graduates that I talk to who apologise for not continuing in their scientific careers. And to me, it's really clear the impact that they will have in whatever walk of life they go into. But it would be nice to be able to quantify that. Absolutely.
I know that the individual professional and learning society has often published reports talking about the economic impact of engineering, of mathematics, of physics, chemistry, and biology, of course. But I suspect we only talk to ourselves, not promote the wider understanding of the value, economic value of all the sciences to the UK economy. So David, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I've got 2 more questions and I'm going to try and draw things to a close. And the first one of those is from Rhys Morgan. Rhys.
Hi there, thank you. So engineers being creative problem solvers are in academia are removing requirements for maths and physics as prerequisites for study of engineering in undergraduate degrees in increasing numbers. And these aren't just post-92 universities, they're Russell Group, they're various universities across all the sectors, and being inspired as well by the work out in Boston by Olin College, a very famous university that's doing very progressive things in engineering, and now the new NMIT in Hereford and Teddy in East London, new universities being set up to study for engineering study. So I'd just be interested in the panel's views on a new way of creative problem solving to address shortages of engineering skills by removing the requirements for study entirely in the first place. Thank you.
I'll go first then. Again, I think Julia quoted earlier a McKinsey report. There's a great McKinsey report that I've spent quite a bit of time on over the last number of months called Softies, which is the social and emotional and technological skills that are going to be required as the workforce needs to pivot over the next, I think 14 years was their horizon. Yeah, it was from 2016 to 2013. So I think to your point, Rhys, there are absolutely still requirements for these real deep problem solving skills, but certainly what we are seeing in our organisation, and this is paralleled in the McKinsey research, is a much greater need for social and emotional skills. For people who can expose themselves, make themselves vulnerable. So that's a key issue, and we're certainly working a lot with our staff on some of the softer skills, but really looking to bring in a much more diverse group of talents into the business as problem solvers.
Excellent.
I would say as a former Vice Chancellor, who where we looked a lot at removing some of these requirements, that actually in general the students are still going to need those skills. But of course, if you can motivate them to want to learn them because they have to have them to solve the problems, that gives you your opportunity then to start introducing some of that teaching. But actually, one of the ways we found that was a good way of doing it was actually to bring in teachers, not have the academics try and teach them stuff, but to bring in teachers to fill in those gaps when it was needed. So I think there are other ways of knitting together the elements that people need, and sometimes getting them motivated to learn is it's better to do that later than earlier.
Thank you. And Reece, thank you for your question. So our final question for tonight is going to go to Rachel Ward. Rachel, are you there?
Hello, good afternoon. Could you hear me?
We can.
Yes, thank you. I'm from the Institute of Food Science and Technology, and you may not know, but food manufacturing is one of our biggest manufacturing sectors in the UK. And given the current situation, we have a significant lack of resources being made available for ongoing training for SMEs. They make up 90% or more of the food sector. And so my question was, will there be specific provision to support SMEs, and probably not just in the food sector, but with the STEM training and skills that we need to support our national infrastructure, but in particular to support our national food security?
Anyone want to comment on that from their own perspective?
I would certainly say that the food industry is recognised as, one of the UK's very major industries. So I would hope that there will be, and it is certainly one that we emphasise in our work in terms of trying to get young scientists and engineers from the food industry into schools, so that young people recognise that there are careers and there are important professional careers in this industry.
Thank you. I think that makes a very important point, and it really underlines a lot of what we've been discussing this afternoon, which is that the myriad of jobs and occupations that are available across the whole economy that require a STEM education, and that can be then creative, rewarding, well-paid, problem-solving jobs, isn't necessarily understood enough by the wider public. And that is, I suppose, a role that we all have to step in and try and fill. And I know that STEM Learning does a lot of that in schools through their incredible network of ambassadors, and schools that embrace this, I'm sure Ali would attest to this, can make a real difference to people's life chances through giving them that excitement, that inspiration about what is available out there, and then giving them the skills to be able to tap into it. And then, of course, Donald's organisation, Jacobs, can hoover them up. And who would have thought that a company that might look like an infrastructure provider is actually providing 3,500 scientists to work on the issues of getting us to Mars, which I think is a fascinating challenge and probably not understood widely. And so there is an awful lot of excitement out there. There's an awful lot of change that's taking place rapidly, and to grasp that, and for us to make our way in an ever-changing, rapidly changing world, particularly in light of COVID, making sure that our young people have the skills that match the jobs that will exist is vitally important. And I think we are all dedicated to that agenda. It's a question of now continuing to build on it, to deliver it, and expand it where possible, and get that next generation inspired to do these jobs. and take up their place in a very exciting sector. So can I thank my panelists, Julia, Baroness Brown, I should say, Ali Denholm and Donald Morrison for your contributions. Can I thank all our questioners for getting their questions into the in so succinctly so that we could get through almost all of them. I'd also like to thank the organising team at the Parliamentary and Scientific Committee, which is Lee Jeffs, Karen Smith and Ben Allen, who organised this, and of course Charlotte Hall, who's there somewhere, who will be writing a report of this meeting, which will appear in our next edition of Science in Parliament, which is our quarterly science magazine that goes to all members of Parliament and other various organisations, and that will be published in October. Now, as I said at the beginning, we have had a series of these Zoom meetings. We are going to continue to do that. We have more planned, and our next one is actually a fortnight today, on Monday the 12th of October at 5:30, where we will be discussing racial inequality in the UK science community. And of course, whereas previously there may have been a limit on the number of people who can attend and get into a crowded room in Parliament, if we do these things virtually, there is no limit to the number of people who can attend and hear from, I'm sure, another very interesting panel of speakers. I hope you've all enjoyed this evening as much as I have. Again, thank you to everyone who's made a contribution, and I hope to see you again at another Parliamentary and Scientific Committee meeting very soon. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.